Hello and warm welcome to the online event today at the regional representation of the state of Hessen in Brussels for our event with the leading question, expectations of SMEs of the 2021 EU's industrial strategy, trades and skilled craftsmen section. What are the repercussions in the present strategy presented last May? 14 topical areas have been made public, but SMEs are no longer explicitly to be found and summarized in one act. SMEs are concerned by all these topical areas, but there's not a strategy of its own for them. And that's why we would like to talk about the impact of this strategy, what might be the consequences, what opportunities and challenges for the small and medium-sized companies. And as we are in representation of the state of Hessen, it's an excellent opportunity to present to you the new president of the Chamber of Skilled Crafts Frankfurt-Rhein, Susanne Haus, who will be joining us as well. She's representing more than 32,000 SMEs in the metropolitan area of Frankfurt-Rhein, a strong point of economic power in Europe. She's a skilled painter herself with her own company, and she's very close to the base. And after more than 120 years, she's the first woman in this position. It was about time as well. And she will describe how she sees the strategy of the EU. And we'll talk about this together with Nicola Beer, member and vice president of the European Parliament, and Hubert Gambs, Deputy Director General of DG Grow for Internal Market Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Very long title from the European Commission. How we'll explain why the SMEs are at the last position of this enumeration. Before talking about all these matters in our discussion, I'd like to give the floor, first of all, to the Minister for Federal and European Affairs, Mark Weinmeister, Secretary of State for European Affairs of the state of Hessen. Well, warm welcome at our regional representation of the state of Hessen. I'm really happy that we are able to have another event together with the Chamber of Skilled Crafts of Frankfurt-Rhein. And the decisive element here is that, as Mrs. Engel just indicated, that we have a premiere here. The first time ever that not the House is here with us, but the first female president. And dear Mrs. Haus, warm welcome at our presentation here in Brussels. We have a wonderful cooperation already since 2010 with your office here at the regional representation of Hessen, and also with the former President Bernd Ehringer and all those Christoph Ries as Director General with us today as well, and Vice President Mr. Held also with us. So this is a great sign, a great signal from your side, and the excellent cooperation of the last years. Meisterbrief, Master Pro had these very important chapters, the dual apprenticeship system, and also questions linked to particularities of standardization coming up for the craft sector. We've always had an excellent cooperation. It's a very good signal that this will be continued as well. What is important as well for us is that in the new industrial strategy of the European Union, we not only have a view on the big companies, but have a look at the effects of the EU policy on small and medium-sized enterprises, and to see also how the obligations and the burdens due to digitization, globalization, Green Deal will be coming up for the economic sector. We have to put our strength together to make sure that they are distributed in an equal way, a fair share of the burden. And so this is a really important point to be discussed today. I'm really looking forward to the discussions. I'm happy that Nicola Beer, one of my predecessors, first, you're Secretary of State for European Affairs of the state of Hessen, the Minister of Culture, Vice President now of the European Parliament, is with us as well. She knows Frankfurt-Rhein quite well, and that's why she's a very competent discussion partner as well. And I'm happy that Hubert Gambs has been able to join as well, as announced already from the European Commission as Deputy Director General is with us here today as well. So Gudrun Engel will be leading the whole debate. Always at our side for important discussions with her know-how and her expertise to lead the discussion. I'm really looking forward to this because I think that's going to be a very exciting discussion and a lot of aspects will be mentioned here that are of particular interest for small and medium-sized enterprises. There's a lot of questions as a regional representation of Hessen as well for the Commission, talking about SMEs, also with a view in the future. Fit for 55 is one matter. What will be the implementation? How can the specific needs of SMEs be taken into account as well? On the other side, we have the question of common supply chain legislation, which is in the agenda as well, of utmost importance for SMEs as well, to have a uniform procedure for the whole of the EU, having more certainty in the legal aspects and planning possibilities. And then standardization. Is this really helpful? SMEs in Hessen are also very strongly oriented towards export activities, and they try to take part on the international markets, and standardization as we have it in the European Union and beyond are really helpful standards maybe for the whole world as well. So a lot of questions that will be coming up together with the crafts sector, with the industry and chambers of commerce as well. And so I'm really happy that this has been possible today as an event in Brussels. I would be even happier if we had a room full of people here, but the digital format is still imposed. So, but I'm quite convinced that in the near future things will be changing, and I wish a very interesting and exciting event to all of you with lots of information useful to your daily activity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Secretary of State Mark Waldmeister, for these very friendly introductory words to welcome our participants. If you want to take part in the discussion as well, from your questions for Mrs. Haus, Mrs. Beer, or Mr. Gambs concerning the industrial strategy and SMEs, please take part. You have an opportunity to address your questions via email to the following address that will be shown on the screen as well. Streamline at lv-Brussels, German way, ue.hessen.de, streamline at lv-Brussels, German style, .hessen.de, or by phone as well. +32 472 030181. I repeat, 0032 472 030181. We're looking forward to your contributions, but first of all, we'd like to introduce the new president of the Chamber of Skilled Crafts in Frankfurt-Rhein, Mrs. Haus. Thank you very much, Mrs. Engel, dear spectators, dear guests here in the room and out there on your screens as well. Thank you very much for tuning in today. My name is Susanne Haus, and I'm really happy to be at the first event in Brussels as the new president of the Chamber of Skilled Crafts Frankfurt-Rhein. It's an immense pleasure for me. I should like to thank the Minister for Federal and European Affairs of the State of Hessen, and also representative at the Federation, Mrs. Lucia Puttrich, not present here today, unfortunately, as well as Secretary of State for European Affairs of the State of Hessen, Wacke Weinmeister, and all the members of the team of the regional representation here in Brussels who've made this event today possible. Thank you for the very trustful cooperation. Mr. Weinmeister mentioned it. It has been taking place for long years now, and we are looking forward to continue this exchange in the future. Warm welcome also on behalf of the Chamber of Skilled Crafts Frankfurt-Rhein to our guests today. I would like to welcome also the Vice President of the European Parliament, Nicola Beer, You, Mrs. Beer, help to shape Europe on a daily basis and are currently also helping on a new government coalition to get off the ground. We are therefore very pleased that you have taken the time to be here despite all the coalition discussions taking place in Berlin, obviously. I would also like to welcome Mr. Hubert Gambs, Deputy Director General of the Directorate General. You've mentioned the long title already. Taking the time to discuss here with us. So thank you for your participation as well. It's good to have you here. And dear Mrs. Engel, as our moderator today, welcome to you as well. It's a great pleasure to talk to you about an important topic as the EU industrial strategy and the needs of the craft sector in Hessen. The craft sector, with its small and medium-sized enterprises, firmly anchored in the history of Europe. Craft workers think and feel European. The craft sector is one of the foundations of Europe as a business location. And against this background, we want to ask ourselves the question here on the panel. What does the EU's industrial strategy mean for craftspeople in the Frankfurt-Rhein metropolitan region and in Hessen as well? Digitization, Green Deal, conference on the future of Europe, where the skilled craft sector is directly affected by topics that are discussed and implemented at European level. More than 70% of the laws in Germany as well have their origin at the European level. Decisions in Brussels shape the daily lives of our member companies and the workers in the skilled craft sector. That's why we work in close cooperation with the German Confederation of Skilled Crafts, ZDH, for regulations for our members that are friendly to small and medium-sized enterprises, practical and workable. We represent more than 32,000 companies and 135,000 crafts people from the metropolitan region, Frankfurt-Rhein region that has been taking advantage of a strongly united Europe as well. The craft sector, with its small business structures, of such an outstanding importance for Europe as an economic location, and is also, especially in times of crisis, a stabilizing factor in the economy. Why then are we in Europe currently only talking about an industrial strategy and not about a strategy for the crafts sector, SMEs, and industry? We would like to focus on a political approach that is representing SME and crafts interests as well, taken on an equal level, in order to make sure that green objectives are implemented. We need planning, safety, stability for investments, and less red tape. Closed borders, interrupted supply chains have to be avoided. The EU must not forget that in addition to industrial production companies, people are also needed to install the new heating system, install solar panels, and live sustainability every day through renovation and repair. The craft sector is given an example, and together as SMEs, we want to be heard and considered. And we have to think about the young people as well. Without society as a whole promoting dual education, the shortage of skilled workers will worsen, and the implementation of ideas for the future will become more remote. And double digitized and green effort will be made possible. We need young people to have certainty for the craft sector in the future as well. Without timber and affordable energy prices, however, there will also be no businesses that can provide Europeans with a sustainable house or the renovation they need. Just to give an example already. We need a strong, autonomous Europe with strong craft enterprises and well-qualified practitioners. At this point, I would like to remind you of the economic and social importance of the Master Craftsman Diploma, Meisterbrief. The pandemic has made this clearer than ever and shown how dependent we are on non-European countries and even how quickly even intra-European borders can be rebuilt. Dear audience, dear guests, as the president of the Chamber of Rhein-Main-Frankfurt, I'm really happy that you've been able to join us for this event. I'm looking forward to stimulating discussions with you and hand over again to our moderator, dear Mrs. Engel. You have the floor again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Haus, for this very clear indication and clearly pronounced demands already. We are going to talk about this. And I'd like the following persons to join us. Nicola Beer, Vice President of the European Parliament, as well as Hubert Gambs, Deputy Director General of the DG GROW, with a very long title, Internal Market Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Well, welcome to all of you again. Now, I'd like to grab the opportunity, Mrs. Beer having with us, to change topics very briefly. You've been in Berlin earlier this week for first indications. No more selfies were made since then. Are you allowed to talk about the general atmosphere? No. Okay. But your insight, your evaluation next week for the summit, Mrs. Merkel will be coming. There's another summit coming up in December. Do you think that at that moment in time there will also be a change in the representation on European Council level? Mrs. Scholz has made some indication. I will not say anything about this. This is indicating the seriousness with which all partners in the discussion are advancing in their exchange. It's very serious, very disciplined, and the more we do so, the quicker will it be possible to reach good results. That's why I will maintain this line. I'm sorry, I know that right now it's interesting. A lot of people, even beyond the state of Hessen and Federal Republic, I have a lot of discussion partners here in Brussels, obviously, but we try to work out the best for Germany, and that will not go with intermediate discussions and leaks to the public. I try to be disciplined in order to reach the goal as quickly as possible. So let's say we are advancing quickly and you will be moving between Frankfurt and a city with a B. That's what you're saying, but I love to go back to Frankfurt, but our capital is also worthwhile to travel to. Okay, then let's talk about the future, not of the federal government in Germany, but of the SMEs in the context of the industrial strategy of the European Union. In Parliament, you will be talking about this quite intensively as well. What's your impression? What is this strategy able to reach? Mrs. Haus indicated clearly that the SMEs are not mentioned enough. Is that your impression as well? Yes, I can share this view. I will not attack anyone here. This is a huge paper with darker and lighter areas, a lot of good approaches and elements already. But as we are talking with the Hessen and Frankfurt-Rhein skilled craft sector and talking about SMEs after even a revision of the documents this year. I think this has been added a little bit, but it's not really living the SME element. What has been made with the industrial strategy is focusing on the big companies for industrial alliances and others. Well, SMEs can be involved as well, but I don't really see this in the implementation step. But most of all, I think that SME representatives will need more than only a certain perspective of the European Commission concerning digitization and climate transformation for the next 5 years. I'm rather talking about a European pact to set free all these matters. SMEs are not asking for give me money, but let me do my job. For such a pact, there would be a need to reduce red tape. One in, one out is the intention here, reducing the burden for some. We would need 1 in, 2 out to really reduce bureaucracy and red tape. When I see what has to be filled in as forms, additional reporting being prepared, so we need a specific point of view with an SME tester. Are there regulations that cannot be implemented by SMEs? Then it has to be taken out. Is a craftsperson in Oberursel able to do this? If not, take it out. That's the first point. So really reduce red tape in an unleashing pact. So bureaucracy with funding could be brought together. So we have to work on a necessary capital and funding for SMEs. How can they reach this? In the taxonomy, we will have a regulation which not only will add a huge reporting chapter, at the same time making it more difficult for banks to make funding of SMEs possible if they want to be in a bad position for the green asset ratio. So I'm sorry, one of these formulations has to be taken out. It has to be clear that our SMEs will continue to need access to liquidity. So we are bringing up our packages, but make it more complicated to do this. The SMEs have also qualified staff as a matter. So we need a long-term qualified staff strategy. They want support in innovation matters, but in a network way with research institutions, with universities, a possibility to put this in their tax the declaration as well for research and development, not additional taxes to be brought as some are dreaming now with own EU taxes. No, we have to reduce taxes, especially on a national or on a regional context. And then we have the major topic resources as well, dependence and energy prices. So we have to get away from these high energy prices, especially in Germany. A few proposals have been made, and I'm joining you when you say that all the national tax models have to be taken out. Electricity change, energy change. How will a crafts baker be able to reach this? The supply contracts will be cancelled because they're not able to follow along. So there's going to be additional inflation as well, and we have to take this up, and quite urgently. I've heard yesterday that China, and these are really important elements for SMEs and craft sectors. The magnesium exportations have been stopped by China. Great. So we're not only talking about all kinds of metal transformation areas. This goes into almost all sectors, indicating again that we are quite vulnerable here because we do not have a common strategy towards China. We've had an EU-China agreement powered through at the end of the German presidency just before the 31st of December. The Americans are not happy, and the Chinese are reacting with a magnesium export stopper, so they're not taking us serious at all. Great job. And we have to reduce these types of dependence, and we have to be developing the common European strategy against these systemic competitors. There's a few elements in the Austrian strategy, but it's not enough by far. It's indicating the bigger ones will be solving problems. As we had a discussion with Mr. Altmaier concerning the national European champions, my champions are the people from the SMEs, especially the crafts people. So you've mentioned a huge number of elements and points where we'll be coming back to in the just afterwards in a detailed way. How can we get out of the corona crisis? What are we doing with the deficit of qualified workers, raw materials that have to be brought together in a common strategy? But first of that, Mr. Gambs, we have heard from two sides now. It's not really received positively what you've been elaborating here, the document. At the same time, as Mrs. Beer said, especially in Hessen, most of the companies are SMEs. 1 out of 2 jobs is made possible by an SME. But they are not really mentioned specifically in the strategy. Why is that so? Thank you very much, Mrs. Engel. First of all, I'm going to help you with the long name of the Director General. So why are we at the end of it all as SMEs? Well, that was a decision bringing together a lot of elements. Being last doesn't mean you're really least. It's in the name at least, and it has always the intention of the Commission that the SMEs are specifically mentioned, but it has becoming longer and longer. So we call ourselves the DG Grow in Brussels. It's in English, but at least it's shorter. And growth is needed for all, especially growth for SMEs as well. Concerning the question why the SMEs are not mentioned specifically in the industrial strategy. Well, I have to lead you back again. 1 week before the pandemic broke out, March 2020, the Commission proposed a whole package of strategies, an industrial strategy and also an SME strategy, a dedicated, specific SME strategy. At the same time, we've made proposals for the internal market because all this was one main package. Industrial matters are not alone. SMEs are not existing on their own. There has to be an exchange continuously, and all this will be working in a well-functioning internal market, creating opportunities for companies, the big ones and the smaller ones as well. So in March 2020, 1 week before the pandemic broke out, we were happy that the lockdown intervened only 1 week after that. We had a dedicated SME strategy presented at the time as well. And as a commission now in May of this year, we've made an update, revised version of the industrial strategy. That was the project. And we've been thinking, do we have to bring a new documentation for internal market as well and for an SME strategy as well? And after our reflections, we thought that the SME strategy is still relevant in the initial form, and that's why the Commission decided that we do not need another special strategy for SMEs. The industrial strategy of May 21 was really an update of the previous version. What are the conclusions for us? Because the situation has been changing in a major way with the crisis, with the pandemic, or the whole economy has been put in a situation that has never existed as a challenge before. And our result in this was to say that the SME strategy is still relevant and in the right version. Why? Because there's a major impetus on areas like digitization or sustainability, not the only ones. You're quite right. When you say that the administrative burden and obstacles, the need for reduction of red tape is really important, specifically for SMEs, and it's still a topic where we are quite intensely involved. And legislation on the European level is one level, EU, and then on national and on regional level. So this is concerning all of us at all levels. And what has been added due to the crisis is one specific aspect of pertinent relevance for the SMEs, resilience in crisis situations. And specific measures have been taken quite quickly, actually. For instance, in the proposal for the instrument companies need support to make sure that the workers can be put into short-time work schemes and other support mechanisms to maintain employment. And these instruments have been working quite nicely, good results. Companies have been able to keep their people and able to continue as well, especially to be involved right away in the recovery phase now. May I intervene here? It is a matter of supporting the green change, digitization, competitiveness, and to compensate for effects of the corona pandemic. That's true. But let's have a look at the practical side, as you said, in Oberursel or in Bischofsheim, in your city or elsewhere. How dramatic were the calls you received in your chamber? How would you describe the situation? Well, our chamber phones were running hot in this phase. There has to be a differentiated approach for the craft sector. There were certain sectors were impacted more strongly, hairdressers, beautician, beauty sector. They were not allowed to work at all, completely blocked. On the other side, the construction sector can be mentioned. There were certain reductions or restrictions concerning hygiene and health matters. and maybe certain obstacles when you wanted to work at private customers who said we don't want that right now. So certain elements have been leading to reductions and losses. But as a whole, the construction sector has been able to get through the pandemic crisis in a relatively good way. Material deficits, this is, of course, a diminishing element in this overview. But our phones were running hot because there was a marathon of different elements that had to be treated because of quick changes that took place. And the companies were wondering, what's relevant now? What do we have to do finally? Because the conditions had been changing and changing again so quickly, and you had to adapt and react again and again, and right from the start. And it's still the case. There's a high level of uncertainty when these cases were coming in a company. What do I have to do now? As an employer, for instance, why am I not allowed to ask whether my workers are vaccinated or not? I have to be able to tell my customers that we are safe as a company. When you come home, it's necessary for you as well to say that you're vaccinated, and employers wanted the same right. Workers had to continue their work. They had to go on building construction sites with masks on, and working conditions were much more difficult. But there has to be a differentiated way of looking at the different sectors. But do you see a certain recovery now and a relaxation? Well, this is different again as well. If you take up again the example of hairdressers, there's still losses and reduction because a lot of companies are still afraid whether you have the 2G or the 3G rule in Germany. They don't want to go to the hair salon with the 3G conditions, so vaccinated or healed or tested. You have to put on your mask. A lot of people are not coming. Men, which would be easier to get a new haircut that can be taken over by the wife at home. So there are still losses, continuous losses still. But yes, here again, you have to have a look at the different sectors.
Gerade angesprochen, auch da wieder viel Bürokratie.
Yeah. Could we have done this in an easier, more rapid way, or do we still have to adapt each other to the changing situation? I think a little bit more coordination would have been possible. Supply chains in the beginning were interrupted since the member states established the borders again, like Germany in the first place, and then we had the EU Commission and the Council where things changed. But this created a lot of uncertainty. And then I believe, especially in Germany, the middle class, everything we put on the middle class, on the whole population, it was very difficult. It was about schools, about restoration. Every Monday, new things had to be implemented. Nobody understood on Sunday. So I hope in the future things will run more smoothly, and I think that we can get better results if things happen on a more centralized basis instead of discussing in 16+1 combinations. Well, but I think now we should leave this behind. As Germans, we have additional red tape. I was a lot of discussion. Where do I have to ask what for? Why will I get my money from November in March? How will I continue until March? Why do you ask to get my money back? Yeah, all these exceptions. In my opinion, we could have made a calculation, a tax-based calculation. Companies had to pay advances in VAT, then they got money from the government, then they had huge losses. So we could have made a kind of settlement between the losses and the allocations, and this would have been much easier also for the public authorities than websites where you could not connect, where you had to put your demands on platforms, but platforms broke down after a few minutes. So I think now we should look forward, check what we can do, and I always like to say equality is not the result of very specific solutions, but of general solutions. Please be confident regarding the people who are in charge of this, and now we need a kind of push. We cannot prolong the old system, really have to support each other in order to become stronger or get stronger out of the crisis than before the crisis. And then it's very important, all this transformation. We have to push the transformation also, and this is a kind of challenge. Our German middle class has not accepted or handled until now. We have a problem with digitization and digital transformation in Germany, and now we have to push this, to support this, since it's necessary. And then we have our green transformation, and that can also be very useful, since via the technological approach, I will get a better solution than via interdictions and prohibitions. Yes, I wanted to talk about climate change and green transitions, but now you are talking about looking forward. You want to make a proposal for a kind of urgency tool for the internal market in order to make sure that the internal market will be maintained in cases of crisis. Yeah, we have a 25th anniversary of the Schengen Agreement, and everybody closes its borders. So this was not really a highlight of European history. Now, this urgency tool should bring more transparency and solidarity and help to avoid critical bottlenecks. Okay, and where are we right now considering this this tool? The Commission will make a proposal anytime soon. We are currently busy working on this proposal, and there will be a consultation with the member states and other stakeholders, and already during the elaboration phases, we want to get reactions from the different stakeholders. And now our aim is, since we don't know when the next crisis will happen, we want to be better prepared than last time. And of course, I am very fond of this internal market. And in spring last year, what I had to see, it was horrible. These member states, and I can understand them, it was a kind of reaction, overreaction, a too strong reaction, since everybody thought, okay, if I close the border, I will protect myself. And okay, as we could see, this did not work. We have to find other ways in order to react together. And what happened when we closed the borders? Tourists could not travel anymore, but also the craftspeople. Who wanted to do some maintenance, who wanted to work, to do their job. They wanted to cross the border, and they could not cross this border anymore. And then we had the supply chains, which were suddenly interrupted, leading to production problems. And therefore, we are now thinking about what lessons we can learn from this in order to improve the next crisis handling. And now, regarding the SME, it is very important for me. They are part of the industrial ecosystem. And now, these industrial ecosystems, there we have big players, SME, we have public authority, and so on. We have research. All these aspects are part of these industrial ecosystems. And the DG Growth is focusing on these industrial ecosystems and economic sectors. And we tell our colleagues, you will not be working only on the big players. The SME policy must be part and must take place within this industrial ecosystem. And all our colleagues in the DG Growth must now think about the SME in the first place. Okay, now it's really top priority, and it's really a necessary part of these ecosystems. Yes, you wanted to react, I think. Regarding the craft SME, which is my and our topic today. Yeah, we want to take a look from perspective of the SME. SME is up to 250 employees. And in the craft sector, the structures are rather smaller. We have one-person companies until SME with 250 employees. I have 12 collaborators, and I think this is really the average of the typical craft enterprise company with 5 to 10 workers. And I think this is like a European standard. And the number of SME in comparison with the industrial players is a really high percentage. Yeah, it was about 80, 90% at European level are SME. So the significance is clearly highlighted here. It's a very huge group. And the problem of the SME is that they're very small. And these small problems, of minor problems, will not get a friendly ear. And now, if we take a look at Brussels, if we take a look at the European level, we have the problem that all these topics will not be broken down until the SME. And this is my demand. Against the background of the crisis, we were a kind of stabilizing factor, okay? We kept things running. The SMEs made that things could continue, and therefore, we are not happy. We are very unsatisfied that we are not part of the industrial strategy. We need a specific view at the SME, which are already very diverse, and all these small enterprises need support, need funding, not only the big industrial companies. This is what I want to tell you. We really need to focus on these SMEs. Digitization, climate change, these are the two topics which will become very important in the future. And in the parliament, you said that things are not enough until now. And how do you think could you provide the support Ms. Haus is asking for? I would like to have an overview over all these strategies, since very often these strategies do not go very well together. Okay, we have the emphasis on climate change and digitization, but it must also be doable for the SME. If now I take the Fit for 55 package, meaning that we want to get fit and make everybody climate neutral, then this comes together with very specific rules, which are very difficult to implement. Okay, huge companies say, okay, I need 2 more collaborators, then I will ask my legal department to find these people. Now, and regarding a craft company, it's normally the wife doing this kind during her Sunday afternoon. And this will be impossible for these SME. And now, regarding sustainable financing, we have reached at last that these report obligations for the SMEs are on a voluntary basis. But if I establish the same obligations for the banking sector, for SMEs and for industries, then every bank, according an SME credit, will have a negative green approach. and this is counterproductive. And now we have many craft companies that want to show that they are becoming greener, but then they have a huge amount of parameters, of reporting obligations. Instead of saying, okay, what are the 5 most important priorities, looking forward and not in a retroactive manner, then I think we would have many, many companies on board, since they could say, okay, I try to choose ecological materials and so on. And very often we have the correct objectives, but when it comes to implementation, things not go very well together. Regarding the industrial strategy, regarding the middle class strategy, we should take some distance, compare all the requirements, and then make a check which of these requirements can be doable for SME. And as I always say, if a craft company is not able to do something, then we must delete it. Now, regarding the Green Deal and other strategies, we also have the agricultural sector. It's all about harmonization, and very often people tell you that you have to work on this industrial strategy. Is this due to the harmonization, all these contradictions regarding digitization and climate change? If we want a functioning internal market, and I think this is a very useful structure for huge and for smaller companies, then of course we need a certain number of rules that apply to all. And this must not exclude that we have to examine regarding every rule if this rule can be respected by the companies and especially by the SME. And as you said, for a huge company, it's always easy to buy some expertise, but for a small enterprise, things will become more difficult. And this applies to the European and to the national level. We always have to examine these rules, and this is part of the process of the European legislation process. So when we are tabling our proposal, and sometimes we do better than in other cases, but when we table our proposal, we must try to establish rules that can be respected, and that there is a difference between huge companies and smaller companies. Of course, smaller companies also have to contribute to huger objectives like the European Green Deal, of course. And I hope that we can agree on that. All consumers, huge, smaller enterprises, have to participate in this Green Deal goal, otherwise we will not be able to realize this. But to what extent? There we have to make a kind of differentiation. So, regarding the Green Deal, we suppose that everybody wants to participate in it. Now, we have the Green Deal, but we have a more important problem, which is the lack of resources, microchips, regarding the automobile sector. Now, regarding the craft sector, wood, its price increased by 83%. Steel, 150%. And due to the Green Deal, currently we are planning a kind of a wave of renovation. And as you said, Ms. Haus, do we need a separate strategy for making sure that we have enough construction material available at affordable prices? Yes, this is a constant question. To what extent rules can be a useful tool, but we don't want to interact and to limit our free market economy. So, and of course, as a legislator, I can make sure that the framework conditions are corrected. And I'm not convinced of the solution to keep things in my country and to limit international trade. But of course, we would need framework conditions allowing us to react much faster. Okay, and now the situation is I would need to be able to adapt rules rapidly. For instance, if I have a bark beetle in some wood and this wood will be burnt down anyway, then I must be able to react. And the very strange situation for our companies is they have lots of demands, and we have also the lack of skilled workers. And on the other hand, we are lacking material. And then we have the problem for the companies when they have a contract at a certain price level, and then I need a certain part. Okay, for instance, and this part is lacking a chip, and I will not be able to finish the work. Okay, do I have to pay? Do I have to pay then a contract penalty? There we would need support, top-down support to make, okay, we could renounce on a contract penalty. We could introduce a kind of clause. If a company is not able to guarantee the price, then the company is not able to work in a profitable base, which is a danger to this company. And there we must be able to say, okay, here we have some leeway, and here we can do something to help the companies in this situation. Now we need really the growth. Okay, the EPP wrote a letter to Commissioner Breton, where it indicated the complicated situation regarding the construction material prices. You don't want to interact in the market, yes. Regarding the industrial strategy, as we could see, we have the open strategic autonomy. So we have now the open strategic autonomy, which means that we will have our supply chains. And I join Ms. Haus. We have to take a look until what point our rules will be able to provide materials from our companies. And now, if we regard forestry, and if we do things right, this can also be part of the Green Deal. Okay, there's reforestation, CO2 binding, and so on. And this should be part of a planning certainty where we do not over-regulate, but we can have a kind of legal certainty. And then we need partnerships. Partnerships, especially regarding raw materials, where we would need the diversification, limiting our dependency, let me say, magnesium from China. We would need alternatives of providers. And I think there we have a huge potential at the African continent, okay? I think as a European Union, we could act stronger together, okay? We would not need so many different African strategies at Commission level, at member state level, at state level. So it would really be useful for us to have a common strategy in order to pass these shortages. And then, of course, there is still an impact from the pandemic regarding transport, flights, maritime transport. There are still some impact. Could you imagine this kind of solution? regarding the energy prices, we want bigger provisions. Could this be a solution? Okay, now I hope that we can avoid stockage of wood, but we would need some stockage. And it's very important here to highlight the element of the open autonomous strategy. This is something we learned from this crisis. We cannot count on these raw materials coming to Europe constantly. We must make much huger efforts regarding recycling, stockage, and so on, in order to use every option we have. And this is now part of our reflections. And of course, the European Union is not able to be autonomous. We need our importation, okay? We're not autarkic. And then it's also in our interest to export our goods. And we cannot say, okay, we really want to close down. We want to be an independent market. This would not help anybody. But of course, we have to think about it, and which is not a contradiction. Some things should be produced at European level in order to be able to react faster at the next crisis. Maybe the price level will not be the same, or surely the price level would not be the same, but this is a kind of balancing, okay? Then we have the advantage that all these materials are available. Like we saw, some of the pharmaceutical substances were only produced outside of Europe, and now we would need a change. And then we really would have to ask questions why these sectors left Europe. Okay, Germany has been the pharmacy of the world. Why is this not the case anymore? There have been huge cuts in research in the pharmaceutical sector. 90% of medicine are now imported from China or from India. Of course, but if we're not the place to be, if we're not the place to be for people who want to push progress in the chemical sector, in the pharmaceutical sector, then the question is, how will we be able to produce in a more sustainable way? How we have now the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. For Germany, we have a new kind of catalysts with allowing chemical processes to become more sustainable. And I really must open up the space for these smart people, and we must not limit them. Okay? This would be a possibility to get these sectors back to us. And then regarding the red tape, I also have to think about the cost factor. And it's always the question of social security charges. Many sectors left Europe, left the countries, since the social security charges on work were very important. And finally, these sector said, okay, well-trained people, I can also find them in India, and much cheaper than in Germany. Okay, great bridge. Let me just talk about the second point, the shortage of skilled workers. I know you really want to say something about this, Ms. Haus. You have some apprentices also coming from Eritrea, and you're really working in favor of the campus for vocational training in Frankfurt. And how dramatic is this shortage of skilled worker? Yesterday, we had a kind of public health summit. As you said, this is not limited to the crafts sector. We have a general problem of shortage of skilled workers. And regarding our craft sector, we have always been training more people than we actually needed. But this is changing since we do not have enough apprenticeship candidates anymore. And for decades, university got more support and was considered as being the best possible professional career. And now when we are talking about the Green Deal and the challenges coming together, and when we take into account what this means for the craft sector, we will not be able to handle these challenges without trained people. And reaching the climate target without qualified workers will not be able. So our future goals will depend on whether we are able to recruit enough skilled workers. And even my two colleagues from Eritrea, and the problem is always on the linguistic side. When you're living in Hessen, you not only have to learn German, you also have to learn Hessian. Okay, we need these people in the craft sector. We would also need more women inside this sector, and this is one of my topics as a president of this association. We must open up the perspectives to young people. We have hundreds of professions, and many of them could be attractive for girls also. And here we have one more question I would like to share with you. Dr. Kurt Geiser, he asked, the dual apprenticeship system, is this becoming more and more popular in other European countries? They are very interested in our dual apprenticeship system. We have many international delegations coming to our campus. Now, it's really a huge success, but it's not very easy to install. It's really a system that has grown over time, and these companies have to pay their students. Okay, this is what companies in other countries do not understand. Why do we have to pay these people? But it's a kind of confirmation of our quality. I pay a young person when he or she is becoming a skilled worker, when he or she is concentrating on her apprenticeship. This is really something that has grown over the years in Europe, and now we must make sure that enough people make the choice of this export hit, not because it's better or worse, but only because it's necessary, the necessary basis for our society. Thank you very much for this concluding remark. Ms. Haus really wants from the European Union to take more into account the craft sector, I would really like to thank you for this very interesting discussion, and then I would point out two more events at the state representation of the state of Hesse. 26th October, 7 p.m., we will be talking about chances and challenges of digitization and artificial intelligence for not for crafts, but for the other sector. And then on 28th of October, we will be talking about the European Bauhaus. Thank you very much for your